There is a moment that happens to almost everyone. It happens when the car engine turns off, but you do not open the door yet. It happens when the battery on a phone dies and the screen goes black. It happens when the internet connection fails and the video stops playing. In that brief second, before a person can fix the problem or find a charger or restart the router, there is a gap. A sudden, quiet gap. For a fraction of a second, the external world stops feeding information to the brain. The constant stream of data is cut. And for many people, that gap is not peaceful. It is terrifying. It is a moment of pure, unfiltered existence. And the immediate reaction for the vast majority of us is to close it as fast as possible. We check a notification. We turn on the radio. We ask a question just to hear a voice. We treat silence like an emergency. We treat it like a leak in a boat that must be plugged immediately. But why? If silence is just the absence of noise, why does it feel so heavy? Why does it feel like something we need to escape? To understand this, we have to look at what silence actually is. We often think of silence as emptiness. We look at a quiet room and we say there is nothing there. But biologically and psychologically, silence is not empty. It is full. When the external world goes quiet, the internal world gets loud. The human brain is not designed to turn off. It is an engine that is always running. When we stop giving it tasks, when we stop giving it videos to watch, or work to do, or music to listen to, it does not power down. Instead, it switches modes. Neuroscience refers to this as the default mode network. It is the state the brain enters when it is not focused on the outside world. In this state, the brain turns inward. It begins to scan the self. It looks at the past. It looks at the future. It looks at who we are and how we feel. This is the mechanism that people are avoiding. When we say we are avoiding silence, we are not avoiding the lack of sound. We are avoiding the switch. We are avoiding the moment where the brain turns its camera away from the world and points it directly at us. For modern people, this inward turn is often uncomfortable. In the past, throughout most of human history, silence was the default state of existence. A person walking from one village to another had no choice but to be with their thoughts for hours. A person working in a field worked in relative quiet. The sun went down and the world became dark and silent. There was no way to escape it. The brain was accustomed to this default mode. It was used to processing thoughts, digesting emotions, and wandering through the mind. It was a muscle that was exercised every day. But today, silence is no longer a default. It is a choice. And it is a choice that requires effort. We have removed the spaces between events. We have filled the elevators, the waiting rooms, and the train rides with screens and audio. We have filled the quiet moments before sleep with scrolling. Because we are rarely alone with our thoughts, we have lost the tolerance for them. The muscle has atrophied. Now, when silence arrives, it feels foreign. It feels aggressive. The thoughts that arise are not familiar companions, they are intruders. They feel chaotic and loud because we are not used to hearing them. It is similar to a person who has never exercised suddenly trying to run. It hurts. It feels wrong. So they stop. When we stop the noise and the silence rushes in, we are forced to confront what is waiting in the background. And what is waiting there is usually everything we have been running from. Silence acts as a mirror. But it is not a mirror of the face, it is a mirror of the psyche. In the quiet, the unresolved things surface.
It begins with the small things, the embarrassment from a conversation 3 years ago, the task that was forgotten, the email that was not sent. But if the silence continues, the deeper things arrive. Unprocessed emotions float to the top. Sadness that was pushed down by a busy work week, anxiety about the future that was drowned out by a television show, a sense of dissatisfaction with where life is going. These are the unfinished feelings. In our daily lives, we are very good at hitting the pause button on these feelings. When a sad thought appears, we can distract ourselves. When a worry appears, we can drown it out with tempo and rhythm. We push these thoughts into the background. We assume they disappear. But they do not disappear. They wait. They wait for the train ride where the headphones break. They wait for the night where sleep does not come. This is why silence feels heavy. It carries the weight of all the unprocessed data of our lives. It carries the weight of the questions we do not want to answer. Questions like, am I living the life I wanted? Am I happy with who I have become? Why do I feel lonely even when I am connected? These are big, difficult questions. They do not have easy answers. They require time and mental energy to process. But modern life offers an alternative. It offers a way to bypass the questions entirely. Noise. Noise is safe. Distraction is safe. When we focus on a podcast, we are thinking about what the host is saying. We are not thinking about ourselves. When we watch the news, we are worried about the world. We are not worried about our own lives. The external input is a shield. It protects us from the internal reality. It is easier to be angry at a stranger on the internet than to be disappointed in oneself. It is easier to worry about a global event than to worry about a personal relationship. The noise gives us something to hold on to. It anchors us to the surface. Silence cuts the anchor. It forces us to drift into the deep water. And for a generation that has lived entirely on the surface, the deep water looks like drowning. This avoidance creates a cycle. The more we avoid silence, the more frightening it becomes. The backlog of unprocessed thoughts grows larger. The pile of ignored emotions gets higher. So the next time silence comes, it feels even more overwhelming. The pressure behind the dam increases. This leads to a state of constant, low-level restlessness. We see this in how people move through their homes. Walking from the living room to the kitchen, a phone is carried in the hand, not because it is needed, but because it is a safety net. We see it in how people eat. It is rare to see someone just eating a meal. There is almost always a screen, or a book, or a conversation. Eating in silence feels like a waste of time, or worse, a vulnerability. We see it in the inability to just be. To sit on a park bench and do nothing. To look out a window without taking a picture. To wait for a friend without checking messages. These acts feel almost impossible now. The mind craves the input. It craves the distraction. It interprets the lack of input as boredom, but it is actually anxiety. It is the anxiety of being left alone with oneself. It is important to observe this without judgment. This is not a failure of character. It is a reaction to an environment. We built a world that is loud. We built a world that rewards constant connection. We built a world where speed is a virtue and stillness is seen as stagnation. In this world, silence is counterintuitive. It goes against the grain of society. Society tells us to keep moving, to keep consuming, to keep knowing. Silence asks us to stop consuming, to stop knowing, and just exist. And existing is difficult. Existing requires us to feel things we do not want to feel. It requires us to admit that we are tired. It requires us to admit that we are confused. It takes the mask off. When we are busy, when we are loud, we can pretend to be anyone. We can pretend to be successful, happy, productive. We can curate an identity. In silence, there is no audience. The performance stops. And when the performance stops, we are left with the reality of who we are. For many, that reality is not something they are ready to face. So, the noise continues.
We buy headphones with better noise cancellation, not to cancel the world, but to curate a better noise. We sleep with white noise machines. We listen to podcasts to fall asleep, letting other people's voices guide us into unconsciousness so we never have to hear our own inner voice. We fill every corner of time. We treat silence like a void that must be filled rather than a space that could be inhabited. There is a belief that if we keep running, we can outrun the quiet, that if we keep the input high enough, we will never have to deal with the backlog of thoughts. But the silence is patient. It does not go away. It is the canvas upon which the noise is painted. No matter how much paint we throw, the canvas remains underneath. It waits in the gaps. It waits in the glitch. It waits in the dead battery. It is always there, just behind the wall of sound. There is no great conclusion to this observation. There is no trick to make the silence feel safer. There is no easy way to clear the backlog of thoughts. The world will likely get louder, not quieter. The screens will get brighter. The distractions will become more immersive. The ability to escape oneself will become easier and cheaper. The gap between who we are and who we are when we are quiet may grow wider. We will continue to reach for the phone when the conversation lulls. We will continue to turn on the TV the moment we walk into an empty house. We will continue to run from the pause. The silence will remain, quiet, invisible, and unavoidable, waiting for the moment when the noise finally stops.